If you have your Bible, would you turn to 1 Kings chapter 17? 1 Kings chapter 17. We're looking together tonight at a very familiar passage of Scripture. I was telling Brother Jonathan during the handshaking there, it doesn't matter how many times you've done an order of service or see it done, when those lights are on, it'll mess with you. But thankfully my daughter came and loves to give Dad encouragement when he messes up. She told me, you just got to lock in. You just got to lock in. So I'm going to remember that next time it's the test day, and she's sweating that. Just lock in. Go get them, sport. All right. 1 Kings chapter 17. Tonight's, the title of the message tonight is When God Sends You There. When God Sends You There. Again, it's a very familiar passage of Scripture. It's the story of Elijah. As Elijah is fed by the ravens, and Elijah goes and is fed by the widow, and then Elijah raises the widow's son. And we're going to look together, we're going to read the entire chapter together, but I want to look together at a few different things that hopefully will encourage our hearts during our time together tonight. Beginning at verse number 1, And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, this is right after he makes a very bold declaration. Here's the word of the Lord. Get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook Cherith that is before Jordan. So in other words, the news that Elijah just delivered in verse number 1 is not going to be received very well, and so you're going to have to go and hide for a while. And it shall be, verse number 4, that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord, for he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan, and the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. And it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land. So the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. So he arose and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there, gathering of sticks. And he called to her, and he said, Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. And she said, As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I'm gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said unto her, Fear not, go and do as thou hast said, but make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it unto me, and after make for thee and thy son. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, The barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail, until the day that the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. And she went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and she and he and her house did eat many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. And it came to pass after these things, that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick. And his sickness was so sore that there was no breath left in him. And she said unto Elijah, What have I to do with thee, O thou man of God? Art thou come unto me to call my sin to remembrance, and to slay my son? And he said unto her, Give me thy son. And he took him out of her bosom, and carried him up into a loft where he abode, and laid him upon his own bed. And he cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn, by slaying her son? And he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again. The Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came into him again, and he revived. Elijah took the child and brought him down out of the chamber into the house, and delivered him unto his mother. And Elijah said, See, thy son liveth. The woman said to Elijah, Now by this I know that thou art a man of God, and the truth of the Lord in thy mouth is truth. The context of these verses, Elijah is being brought out from obscurity, and he's being put into a front and center role in really a stage of history, something that all of us know going to Sunday school, and the truth and the story of Elijah and the widow and Elijah and the ravens is something that we're all pretty familiar with any type of biblical background. But for this particular context, I think a little history is important. Israel was in the grip, the main throes of pagan worship. They were worshiping the Phoenician god and the Phoenician god Baal, and Baal was the god of fertility, and they would worship, and they believed that when the sun would come up in the morning that God was smiling upon them, and when they would hear the thunder roll in the sky, they believed they were going to receive the blessing of rain, and that was Baal blessing them. And Baal worship was a very sensual and very wicked, fleshly, just very fleshly appealing type of charismatic worship. And we know the example of God's people and prophet challenging Baal to call down rain, and God demonstrating that they were false, and how those people responded to that with just absolute self-annihilation. But God has now allowed Elijah to stand before King Ahab and to declare that there's going to be no rain upon the earth. Now, for this group, that was a problem, and it was one that they didn't take kindly to. And as we notice the transition from verse number 1, where Elijah makes this declaration, verse number 2, God immediately telling him, now you need to go hide for a little while. We see that the message isn't received with open arms, and it isn't received with well, hey, you know what? Let's wait and see how this thing shapes up. It was received with urgency that, hey, this is a problem. You are causing the problem. So Elijah, for his own safety, God brings him into a place of safety. And so when he issues this challenge, he's immediately told by God, now the beginning phase of this process is that you need to go hide. You need to go into a place of hiding. And God tells him, I've created this place. I've designed a place that I want you to go. And look with me, if you would, at verse number 4. And it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. And then when the brook dries up, look at verse number 9. Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't help but think that if I were in Elijah's shoes, I would want a little bit more detail than just, I want you to go there. Think about it. If you were describing a place to somebody and you told them that you wanted them to go and hang out for a while and that this was going to be their place of residence for any period of time, wouldn't you think that you would need just a little bit more detail, a little bit more direction, or perhaps something that would make it sound a little bit more intriguing? I read, it's interesting when you read the postings of real estate listings and the creative writing that goes into that. And it reminds me of the story of the guy that was putting his house up for sale. And the realtor sent him the listing to proof it. And he read it and how great the realtor made it sound. He called him and said, hey, man, this is a house I've been looking for. You can cancel this. But the description is important. You want to talk about what the views are. You want to talk about how close it is in proximity to the different things and how the layout is there. God gives none of those details to Elijah. He tells him, hey, Elijah, I want you to go there, and I'm going to feed you, and I'm going to take care of you. So Elijah's dependent upon total obedience, and he's dependent upon what the Lord is going to do and to accomplish when he gets there. So the title of the message is When God Sends You There. And tonight, I think by way of reflection, we can answer, or we can ask ourselves the question of, am I there? Am I there? Am I in a place where I'm dependent totally on, for the Lord to lead me, to guide me, to provide for me, to sustain me? Am I at a place in my life where I'm not looking for the creature comforts and I'm not dependent on what I know and how I would have it to be, but I'm at a place where even if I don't understand it, and even if it's not what I would have dreamed or not what I would have chosen, I'm at a place where I'm totally dependent on what the Lord is going to do for me and through me and with me. And if you are, can I just say to you tonight, we could be encouraged in our hearts that whenever we're there, we can rest assured the Lord will meet every need, and He will bless abundantly, far greater than we could ever ask or imagine. So where is there? Where is that place? What is the description? Well, it doesn't get very wordy for Elijah, but we see examples of this particular there in repeated in the Scripture. For Noah, it was an ark. For Daniel, it was a prayer room and then a lion's den. For the three Hebrew boys, it was a furnace, heated in a sense that was designed to kill them. For Ruth, it was in a field that was owned by Boaz. For David, it was a throne in Israel. For Paul, it was a prison cell. For Jesus, it was a cross. It was a garden where he felt all alone. There is not always a place of comfort, and there is not always a place of luxury, but it is always a place of blessing. So let's look at a couple of words that I think there are a couple of descriptions that we could give if we were describing this place where Elijah was. If Elijah were to write back home and tell us, hey, you will never believe where I've been, the postcard from Elijah would describe this place in a few ways, I would believe. First of all, I think that we would see, and Elijah would tell us, there is a place where God's promises are fulfilled. There is a place where God's promises are fulfilled. God promised Elijah that the ravens would feed him there. All he said is go there and by the brook. And when you get there, don't worry about food. Don't worry about coming out and looking for food and having to gather it. I've got you taken care of. I've got the ravens. They're going to feed you, and they're going to feed you there by the brook. And so he tells him, when the brook's dried up, now I want you to go over there to the widow's house, the widow of Zarephath, and I'm going to command this widow. I'm going to work in her heart, and I'm going to prepare a means that you could be fed there. Notice what Elijah doesn't have. He doesn't have the promise of abundance. He doesn't have the promise of luxury. He doesn't have the promise of desire, but he has the promise of God's fulfillment of what he needs. And for the believer, it's very important that we remember that God may not give to us that everything that crosses our mind or every desire, the worldly gadgets and the gimmicks that are out there, but God's people can rest assured that when we seek to serve Him and follow Him and are obedient to His will, we will have our needs met. He has yet to find a need He could not meet. So what does He give? He gives to Elijah a simple promise. Go there, and I've commanded the ravens to feed you. Well, did God keep His promise? Well, absolutely He did. And the ravens, verse number 6, brought him bread and flesh in the morning. Now, I will tell you, I'm not sure what size the pack of ravens was that was bringing the flesh. I could imagine that Elijah is not gaining weight on this particular diet, but the Bible gives us no indication that Elijah is lacking for anything whatsoever that he needed. But Elijah doesn't barter with God. He doesn't go back and forth and say, Lord, you've got to, surely there's some other means, and surely there's some other plan. Lord, I'll take my chances with a sharp stick. Let me go out with a spear, and I can do better than what these birds can bring. No, Elijah's trusting what the Lord has given to him, and he sees this need met. So there is a place when the Lord sends us to those places where it might not make sense, and we might not be able to see the end from the beginning, and we might not be able to sort all those details out. We can rest assured that there in our life, wherever God sends us, wherever God leads us, it's always a place that God's promises will be fulfilled. And we can discover, or will discover, that God always does and keeps every promise He's ever made. He's as good as His word, the psalmist declares, and we can rest assured in that. He'll keep His promises whether you and I ever get there or not. It won't be because the Lord is slack in keeping His promises. But how many of us could testify, and I'm sure many or most of us could, of either in our own personal life or in the lives of others, where we have seen the blessing of the Lord meet needs that we never imagined how those needs were going to be met. We never saw, we never imagined, we couldn't have dreamed it or scripted it any more unlikely. But there the Lord was, honoring His word, keeping a commitment that He would meet the needs of His people. When God sends you there, could I just encourage our hearts tonight to obey and rest assured that He will honor every promise of His word. But not only do we see that it's a place of promise, where God's promises are fulfilled, but look at verse number 6, if you would. The ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. And then verse number 15, and she went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and she and he and her house did eat many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. There is also a place of provision. It's a place of provision. That when God brings us to those places, it's there that he is able and does so often demonstrate that he is able to meet our need, and his provision is always sufficient. When Elijah got there, it was the ravens that were flying in right on time, just as the Lord had ordered, morning and evening. Now, where did they get the food? You ever think about those kind of things? Well, the Lord had set those things up in his provision, in his timing, in his order. Elijah didn't have to wonder. He didn't have to worry. Every time the meal clock was striking, there those birds were bringing and delivering. And there's a brook. Just think about that. The Lord had, in his goodness, the Lord had provided a means of substance and a means of sustenance for Elijah to be able to survive in this place of hiding. And when he arrives at the widow's house, he sees the Lord literally suspend the laws of nature and of logic and of every other provision to provide for his needs and for the needs of the widow and for the needs of the widow's son. You see, I don't know where there is in your life or in my life, but I do know that there is in the context that we're looking here, it's a picture of the will of God. And it's a picture of wherever the Lord would send you and use you and have you and place you. And when God's sending you somewhere, when God's leading you in those places, or he's got you in a place that seems unlikely or uncomfortable, we can rest assured, not in our provisions, not in our understanding, not in our ability, but we can rest assured that God is able to meet every need. And not only is he able to meet every need, God has already made the provisions to meet the needs. They call it grace ahead of time. You'll see that God is the God who promises, but he's not just one that promises, he's one that has the means to provide and to fulfill every promise that he's ever made. And I rejoice tonight in knowing, and you can too, that God knows every need. There's not one that catches him off guard. Have you ever thought of that? That God never has wrung his hands yet, and he's never had to scratch his head and say, well, I tell you that didn't go exactly like I thought it was going to go. He's never resorted to plan B, not one time, and I don't believe that he's going to. God is a God of knowing and understanding, and he leads us and he directs us and he guides us in ways that only he can meet our needs, in ways that only he can get the glory for what's accomplished. Because if we could get the glory, guess what? We surely would. We would pat ourselves on the back, and we would take that credit and really puff ourselves up. But God specializes in bringing us to those there places of our life where his provision is all that sustains us. Verse number 4, and it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. It's just as unlikely that God would command a raven to feed you as he would a poor widow woman. That somebody that's destitute, that's down to their last meal. The desperation of her situation as she says, hey, listen, I appreciate what you're saying, and the Lord is my witness. We don't have it. We don't have it. We'd give it to you if we did. We don't have it. And not only do we not have it, we've only got enough for one more meal ourselves, and we're preparing for the end of our life. The desperate, unlikely situation. But God is a God of providence. And we can see that on display when we're at those places of there in our life. When Elijah gets there, he's reminded that God is a God that is at work in both ends of time. With both the ravens and with the widow, he's already met that need. He's already provided a brook that's going to bring water. He's already commanded the ravens to know where to bring the food. He's already begun working in the heart of this widow. God is a God of providence, that he's not bound by time. He's not bound by our situation. He's not bound by our location. He is the God that is able to meet our needs, whatever it is. Those who go with God and find this location, they find His will in their life, they soon come to understand that they are not serving a God that is bound by the normal constraints that we have. God is, one commentator says this, your tomorrow is His right now, and whatever takes place in your life is the result of His pre-planning. There are no accidents. There are no coincidences, only the providence of God working out His plan to accomplish His will in the life of every believer. And what a stark reminder that when we find ourselves in unlikely times or we find ourselves in uncomfortable situations, listen, I can't help but think that Elijah would have desired the victory or would have desired to demonstrate boldness and confidence in God in a much more courageous way. In fact, he has just went and confronted the king. And in confronting the king, he has to kind of bow himself up to deliver bad news in a courageous tone and to do so in a way that's going to require boldness. That doesn't strike me as somebody that says, well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go confront them, and then I'm going to run. That's not a logical, likely plan. So I can only imagine that Elijah's plan would have been, Lord, I'm not only willing to go and say these things, I'm willing to lead people to defend your name or to defend your honor or to defend your word. But that wasn't the Lord's plan. The Lord's plan was, Elijah, I want you to go and confront them and tell them what's fixing to happen. Judgment's fixing to come, and they're going to go through some difficult time. And then, Elijah, I want you to retreat, and I want you to allow them to see me at work. And those situations in our life are more common than not. When the Lord is leading us and directing us in ways that we might not be able to put all the pieces together, we can sit back and be assured that He has every detail worked out and that He alone will get the glory. When we would be reminded that our needs, whatever they are, we can be reminded and assured that those are the evidences of God's supply in waiting. There's not one thing that God's not able to meet. There's not one thing that God's not able to deliver and to bring us through. When those needs happen, God's not looking for credit. He's not looking for someone to borrow from. He's not looking for someone to bail Him out. He has the supply, and He is a God that is able to meet every single one. When we think of this particular place of provision or promises or of God's providence at work, you can't help but notice that when we get to that place of our life there, where we're relying on the Lord, where we're in His will, obedient. And listen, I'm not one that subscribes to an opinion or a belief that the Lord's will is always destitute and always you're lacking or you're wondering where your next meal is coming from. I've been following the Lord for a number of years now, and He has blessed far beyond measure. But I can assure you of this, that when we are following the Lord and listening to Him and following His leading, we will always stand, or should always and can always stand amazed at His power on display. And that's exactly what's happening in Elijah's life. The Lord is showing out, and God is showing out in a way that is bringing attention and glory and honor to Himself. It's not for Elijah, and it's not just for Ahab and Jezebel and for all of those. It's not just for Israel. God is getting the glory and demonstrating His power in a way that none of them could have, and Elijah never would have been able to have taken the credit or have patted himself on the back for this plan, because no one would have done it. When we are at that place in our life, or there, when God leads us to those there moments or those there situations, we can see that it's a place where God's power is on display. Elijah gets to see this with his own eyes and experience with his own belly and with his own mouth, the provision of God, taking care and meeting the most basic of needs, that there's not one thing that God didn't have covered. He's got shelter from, once Elijah Actually, chapter number 18, we don't have the time tonight to look at that, but in chapter number 18, they turn on Elijah. They begin to look for him, and they begin to kind of turn the heat up. But Elijah is taken care of. He's at a place where he's hidden by the brook at Cherith, and then he goes to the widow's house, these unsuspected places. Again, God demonstrating his power to take care of his own. He gets to see not just the power of God working in his life to protect him and to meet his need, but Elijah gets to see the power of God in meeting the needs of Israel, in meeting the needs of doing his work towards these lost people, these pagans, and God doing a work in the widow's heart, and God ultimately demonstrating this great demonstration of power in raising the widow's son. Now, think about this. As God is demonstrating and working in the life of Elijah, if Elijah's not there, he doesn't get to see any of that. It's only because the Lord sends Elijah, and Elijah, in obedience, follows the Lord's command to these unlikely situations that he gets to see this power on full display. From our own testimony, how many times could we say that we have been in places that, well, when we got there, or when we found ourselves in situations, we said, well, this isn't what I planned. It's not what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. But as the Lord works and sorts out details, we walk away from it, and the hindsight allows us to say, wow, that is something only God could do. That's his power working there. So tonight, I don't know where there is for you. I don't know if you're there tonight or not. But I imagine that a group this size on Wednesday night, for the most part, our folks are striving to honor the Lord and do as he would have us to do, and to obey his word, obey his will, and to live a life that would be pleasing to him. And I trust that's the case. And if so, I believe that you could say like Elijah, boy, I tell you what, I don't know all that God's doing. I can't see the end from the beginning, but I can tell you this, he's not failed me in one promise yet. I can tell you this, he's been able to provide every need that I've ever had. I don't understand I don't understand how he does it. I don't understand everything. But boy, I can tell you what, God has sorted out the details and scripted them far better than I ever could have on my best day. And you know, I can't sort it out. I can't make it compute in a spreadsheet, or I can't load it into an app and make it make sense. But I can tell you this, I've seen the power of God at work in my life, or in my family's life, or in my marriage. I've seen God work as we've followed him, and as we've allowed him to lead, and as we've submitted ourselves to his will. And tonight, if you're here and you say, well, that doesn't describe me, I'm not seeing those things in my life, the challenge would be, ask the Lord, Lord, where is it that you would have me to go? Where is it that you'd have me to be? What is it that you would have me to do? Who is it that you would have me to be? Lord, where is there in my life? Lord, I want to be where I can see your provision. God, I want to be where I can see your power at work. I want to be where I can see and testify of your providence and of your goodness. God, I want to be where the promises of God are meeting the needs of my life. Lord, where is that for me? That's the challenge. Elijah certainly understood that. Verse number 3 tells him to hide himself. And then verse number 9, he tells him, I want you to go and I want you to dwell at the widow's house. He's protecting him. The safest place, child of God, for any of us to be is right where the Lord would have us to be. Whether it makes sense in our checking account, whether it makes sense in our own personal fulfillment, whether it makes sense to our family or to our friends, those things pale in comparison. The safest place, the place where God's protection is always abundant, is right there in the center of his will. I'm often amazed at missionaries that we grew up hearing and believing and being taught that missionaries are the heroes. They're heroes. Much more than any athlete, much more than any one actor or rich person. No, missionaries were heroes. And if the opportunity to fellowship with them or to be around them, that was always a priority. And you know, you hear of them and you see them and hear of their work, or we read of their reports, and people that literally leave every creature comfort that they could have to go somewhere to a people that may hate them, to a people that may want to do them harm. But they do that because that's where the Lord would have them to go. The Lord has put a burden on their heart that is there. That's where they're supposed to be. That's their brook. That's their widow's house. That's where they're supposed to be. And all of them would testify and read or write back repeatedly, and we've heard their testimony so many times. The safest place. No matter how much you miss home or miss family or miss this or miss that, the safest place is the center of the will of God. And child of God, when things get crazy in our world and it looks dangerous around us, and when there's questions that we can't answer, and there's circumstances that we can't control, we can be assured that every single one of us and our children, they're safest right where the Lord would have them to be. That's the place where God's protection is always abundant. Right in the center of the Lord's will is the safest place for all of us. Lastly, tonight, I see this. There is a place of privilege. It's a place of privilege. Elijah learns more about God and about His power and about His promises and about His providence than he ever could have anywhere else. He didn't read about it third hand. He didn't hear about it from someone else. He got to live it. He got to live it. He was chosen to live and to experience this demonstration of God's power. And I can only imagine being there was hard, day by day. Not that he was wringing his hands or that he was worried so much in his spirit, but the life that God had called him to lead and the life and the circumstances that God had called him to weren't the most pleasant. They weren't the most enjoyable, and I imagine that it was difficult. But truly any real step of faith is. And I think that's, if we could see it and we knew and we knew the end from the beginning and we knew exactly how things were going to work out and we had it all planned out, that wouldn't require faith. But true demonstrations and steps of faith, they're often uncomfortable. They're often painful. And such is the case for Elijah. But he gets to see a demonstration of God's power and a demonstration of God's miraculous provision in a way that very, very few people have. But not only that, he gets to see God do something in the life of others. Elijah gets to see God use him in a miraculous way. Here he's able to be the catalyst, if you were, for the widow to step out by faith. Think about that. The widow's, her heart she has reconciled the fact that her days are ending. There is no more supply. The end is here. But in those desperate days, God uses Elijah as the catalyst to help her step out and trust the Lord for provision and being sustained and for meeting her needs. And not only her, but her son and her household, that they get to see. That's God allowing Elijah to be used in these remote, obscure places. Why? Because Elijah was obedient to go there. But not only that, Elijah gets to be used in a way that when the widow's son falls ill, God uses his man who's there, the right place, the right time, by God's providence, to raise the widow's son through a demonstration of faith. And again, another demonstration of God using not to meet Elijah's need, but using Elijah to meet the needs of others. And beloved, if there's anything that should encourage our hearts, it's that when God brings us there, it's always to use us for His glory, for His honor, for His ministry, and for the blessing and the encouragement and the sanctification and the help and the discipleship of others. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to, like Elijah, you're going and raising people from the dead. And I'm not suggesting that the Lord's going to ask you to eat the diet of a bird. But I am suggesting that the Lord is well within His rights to expect His children to be obedient and to humbly follow Him to wherever there is in our life. And when we're there, we can expect that God will honor His word, meet our needs, supply every need, and demonstrate His power, and that He will use us, and we'll be able to see and have the privilege of watching Him use our lives as a blessing and an encouragement and an instrument of His service to others. So the challenge is simple. When God takes you there, God tells you to go there, will you go? Will you obey? Or must we know the details? Must we demand more answers? Would we say, God, that's not fair. I've got to know more. Are we willing in humble obedience to submit ourselves to say, Lord, I don't know where there is. I don't know what there is, but you do. And I'm willing to obey. I'm willing to go, because wherever there is, I know your power's on display. It'll be my privilege to see you work in my life. I know your providence is at work and that you've already made the arrangements to meet the needs that I would have before I got there. And God, I look forward to watching your power on display in my life. Wherever there is, I would challenge you, get there. If you're not there, get there. Ask the Lord, allow you to experience that place. The brook, Cherith. And God, in His sovereign will, just when the brook dried up, He already had a plan for the next step. We don't have the time to take and to talk of chapter 18 and chapter number 19 of how God has prepared Elijah through this time of trusting, complete trust. But I would encourage you, read and you'll see God used these times to remind Elijah of just who it was that he was serving, and that it's always about a greater cause. So the encouragement that I hope and pray for each of us is that, Lord, wherever there is, would you help us to be obedient, to trust you day by day as we serve you wherever there is.